Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the Netflix series Untamed. I'm joined today by actor and executive producer Eric Bana, actors Lily Santiago and Wilson Bethel, along with showrunner and executive producer Elle Smith. Eric, I wanted to start with a question for you because in playing Kyle in this series, he's someone who's very closed off with other people, but we also learn that there's a lot of reason behind this. And I was interested in just your experience and your approach to really digging into this character and finding all the different layers of playing this in your performance.
Yeah, I guess it was a case of just really leaning into the reality of it and having the confidence to go with that kind of gruffer, quite rude Kyle in the beginning, knowing where we would go and how much he would or wouldn't soften depending on which character he was playing off. I love the way Mark and Lauren had created that world for him, that depending on who he was with, he was a different sort of person. So like for Naya, for Lily's character, it was just kind of fun to just start off just being unbelievably rude. And also that setting up that character dynamic, and then just playing off that and that being the beginning of that character arc.
But he's also just a dick, so it comes naturally to him. Oh.
Nothing hard.
Yeah.
And for you, Elle, in kind of like shaping this narrative, it's really a story that like every episode just kind of gives you these gradual reveals of information in a way that really culminates in those last couple of episodes and that final moment in this show. And I was interested in how you found the structure of where you wanted to start giving little details where the audience maybe doesn't know that that's something useful to know yet, but by episode 6 they will.
Sure. Well, for us, this was like a character story that we kind of jammed into a mystery story. We were really interested in the character and Turner's journey and everything that he's going through in his life, and then how that's affecting the case, how the case is affecting him. And so we kind of tried to keep it even as we went, and we trickle out through the mystery of the case itself and then what we're learning about Turner's life until they kind of come to a head, if that makes sense.
No, it really does. And Lily, in playing Naya at the beginning when we meet her, she's very much escaping something and having come out here and having left LA. And, it feels like by the end, she really starts to find this connection with being in nature and this entirely new world that she stepped into. And it becomes something that she really wants to continue being part of her life. And I was interested in just how you really shaped that arc for the character.
Well, thanks to our amazing writers, it was easy. But really, it's I was really lucky to be able to bring a lot of myself in my, like, I come from a city as Lily, and Naya's coming from LA, meeting this vast wilderness that she's uncomfortable with, and she learns what she's actually fully capable of out there, and that she finds out that she loves it. And I think that I was going through a similar journey myself of, there's certain shots where you look around and it's like I was supposed to be in awe. And I was like, I don't even have to act this. I'm just look at this. So it was really, yeah, that similar experience for me and Naya.
Yeah, and you could kind of learn all the things, riding a horse for the first time as you went.
Exactly. I had like 2 lessons. I'd never been on a horse as an adult. I had 2 lessons and we started filming, and Eric's a pro at riding horses, if you can't tell. And I was able to just learn with the character.
Well, Eric, this also isn't your first foray into making a show where nature's so much at the center of the story and aspects at play for your character, because you also made The Dry 2 recently. And I was interested in just how those were 2 slightly similar experiences, but like very different stories and characters to play to, obviously, at the same time.
Oh yeah, no, it's a real treat to be able to work outdoors and work with natural light. And there's an amazing energy that comes from that creatively. I think for all the cast and crew, like just knowing that when the camera comes out of the box at sunrise, that you've only got until sunset to get everything. And I think sometimes we underestimate that there's a real power to that. And there's a real energy that benefits a production. It doesn't hinder it, even though technically you've got less hours. I think sometimes you end up with more.
Yeah. And Wilson, with your character, Shane, he has some quite antagonistic feelings towards Eric's character, Kyle, but we don't necessarily know the history of that and what's happened between them when we first meet him. And so how did you work about playing it with real intent without kind of speaking to it directly or giving anything away at any point?
As it happens, I am also a dick, so it comes very naturally. Just a lot of grumpy white men on this set. No, look, I mean, again, like to the quality of the writing, the mysteries are obviously there for the viewer, but like these characters are so finely tuned on the page that the nature of the antagonism is all built into the circumstances of their relationship, right? Of who these two men are, of the secrets that they share, and where they find themselves at this particular moment. So, I mean, as corny as it sounds, like you show up on the day to play where these two guys are, and you don't have to play antagonistic. Like these guys are these are two lions circling each other in a very, very small cage.
And Elle, as well as just, the overarching narrative, there's so many different storylines that become interspersed and intertwined with one another as the story progresses. And how did you find kind of where you wanted each story point or each plot point to kind of meet each other or kind of cross paths with each other as you were shaping the structure of each of the episodes?
Oh, tricky. Well, we were wanting to really expose the history of the park, and the history of Yosemite and the different kind of factions of all of these different rangers. And so there is kind of a story that goes along with that. So as we're exploring the park and as we're exploring these little pieces, so each episode you're kind of learning something new about the park in addition to the crime, in addition to the characters. So I think that's kind of how we structured it, was kind of exposing the dark underbelly of the park while we're exposing the crime.
It also feels like you're capturing so many different types of communities that live in the park or have connections to the park and the space as well. And, you have a group of people who've decided, like, this is where we live and this is where we've settled. But it also felt like there was such importance in acknowledging and capturing the native relationship to the land as well. And how was that something that was really important in amongst exploring all these multiple different communities for you?
Yeah, so we really want to celebrate the national parks and the rangers that work in them, but we also want to do that by also, talking about the people that lived on this land before and the descendants that still live there now, which is the Miwok people and the traditions that are still there. And it's so ingrained into the park, from the architecture to the culture. And so yeah, that's something that also weaves through our case and through all the lives of our characters, for sure.
Lily, in playing Naya, I feel like you capture so beautifully the fact that, she's incredibly accomplished and she does know what she's doing, but she's in a completely new terrain and setting. So there are things that she hasn't experienced before. And I was interested in just kind of like how you set about finding that footing of that confidence, but also where you wanted to allow her to have those little moments of uncertainty at the same time.
I think it's really like from the jump, as soon as she's instructed to accompany this grumpy guy who does not want company to solve some crimes, she's feeling out of place. I think as a woman in a very male dominated field, she's not unfamiliar with that feeling, but it's to be that unwanted in a completely new place. And I think she thinks she's kind of nice, friendly, so it was a harsh wall to come up against. And I think really in the first two episodes you get to see her attempts and just being like, I'm gonna wear you down, pal. Even as she gets on a horse, even as she's going up mountains when she's used to just flat land and big city. And the crime is different. Like, crime is so different in a city than it is in nature. And nature itself becomes like another character, and the dangers that the nature poses, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think just being thrown in all these new environments, it was just fun to allow myself to be swayed by them.
And Eric, with your character and his relationship that he builds at work with Naya, we start to see his walls come down a little bit, and we start to see this being someone that he does genuinely care that they're okay at the end of the day. But he has his own very unique way of showing it. He doesn't suddenly transform into a warm, friendly, open person. And I was interested in how you just discovered what that would look like for him to let his guard down or to let someone in.
Yeah, I think it's just that kind of subtle journey of it almost seeming like it was somewhat paternal in nature. But the thing I liked about that was that, through the course, by the time we get towards the end, I almost felt like that was happening in reverse as well. I felt like she was actually almost paternal towards Kyle, and him just being able to accept that. And I love the fact that he's kind of imagining the park and his job through her eyes, and the journey that she goes on and becoming more comfortable with nature and with the role specifically within the park.
Yeah, Wilson, with your character Shane as well, there's little kind of details and inflections of what led him into this space in the park in the first place. And, for example, he mentions having been a sniper in Kabul at one point. How did those little details in the script really help to formulate who this character was going to be to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously his military background is obviously very important, both in terms of I think giving him a sense of a high level of capability, and operational know-how in challenging environments, and also giving him real. He's a dangerous man, and you couple that with a guy who probably has spent many, many, many hours alone by himself in the wilderness, kind of cultivating sort of his own moral code as it pertains to a man who lives alone in the woods. And it's a really kind of fascinating, sort of fascinating stew to then introduce opposite somebody like the Kyle character, who is, I think, at a much less certain place. I think Shane McGuire is somebody who feels very like he has a moral code that makes sense to him. And he feels like he righteously adheres to that, whereas maybe like the Kyle character is, I think, really fraught about and standing on much shakier ground in a lot of ways. And I think that's part of the kind of cool antagonism between these guys, these very different places that they come from, while both also being sort of alphas.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elle, in creating the story, there's also this real exploration of grief and how that sits with people. And it really captures the way that it's so nonlinear and it never really goes away, but maybe it can transform into a different version of itself. How did you find the path of how you really wanted to explore that through the story?
We have this kind of overriding theme, and as we were writing, we would kind of check ourselves with this theme of each character has to ask themselves sort of, what would you do for your family? What would you do to protect your family? And what happens if you're unable to protect your family, or if you choose not to protect your family? And so that was something that we kind of stuck to and checked ourselves with throughout. And so that's kind of how we got to those grief points of what happens when you have to protect those you love.
Yeah. And Eric, in playing that idea of grief, I feel like in the way that you play it in some of the scenes where his memories are sitting with him, or he's really just allowing it to absorb him more, it captures that element of how it's an emotional experience to feel grief, but it's also something really physical. And I just wanted to ask you about finding that space through this story.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was there in the writing. A lot of it's just about, like going with what you're feeling on the day. And I guess what's interesting to play as an actor is like most of those moments that you're discussing, you're on your own. So you're really trying to come up with a version of acting language that works for the audience, that makes sense, that you're experiencing this whilst alone. Like, how do I calibrate that? Is it too much? Is it not enough? What would he be doing if he was on his own now? Like, how would he be experiencing this level of grief? And also, we didn't want it to be too overwhelming for the audience at the same time. So I know with Mark and Lauren, there were many conversations about that, and and with our directors, with our three directors, like constantly calibrating as we went. When we can't reveal that here, we already played that card one episode earlier than we thought, or can we bring this down, or should we dial this up? So it was always a case of that, but just being true to what someone who was in that position would be experiencing and what it would be like. Unfortunately, for some of the audience, who for them that would be a reality.
Mhm. And Lily, with your storyline with Naya, in talking about some of the later episodes story-wise, we learned that her husband was very violent towards her, and also that her son has clearly witnessed this as well. And we get to see the reality of what that looked like for her when he shows up on screen. And what was that experience for you in stepping into those scenes and really finding that dynamic in the moment?
One of the scenes was an audition scene. So by the time we got to filming it, I was just so ready to do it. I'd been waiting. I felt like weeks and months just to do that scene. And we were so lucky to have such wonderful directors who really gave the amount of time that I felt was necessary to talk through the moments and the relationship, and then trust our own imaginations and our own physicality and our own expertise to bring it to life. And I think it's so great to have a chance to play a character who's well-rounded, who has flaws, who has a history that's kind of ugly, and still show the strength that she has and the fear that she has. And because I think she goes to work and you see her as a strong woman, and then you can see her in those moments as afraid and smaller and not as powerful. So it was wonderful to have the chance to play that.
Yeah. And Eric and Lily, in terms of your characters' relationship at work together, it feels like there's such a one of the turning points for them is when Naya gets kind of stuck and wedged somewhere, and he has to be the voice to talk her through it and to kind of help her out in that moment. And it's the fact that he even thought to go looking for her and he knew something was up. And I wanted to ask you both about just filming that sequence of scenes together and how you really felt like that was a little bit of a turning point for the two of them as well.
I can safely say it was a little bit more comfortable for me than it was for Lily. And I think I was watching most of it from the monitor and then got called in at the end there. So no, she did an amazing job, and I can honestly say that not easy, right? I mean, the set that was built for that was very complex, so that we could actually literally half drown her, and she did stick, like it was very uncomfortable to watch. So I was very happy to go in there and tap her on the shoe and tell her to get out of there.
Yeah, I think Mark couldn't even be in there for the majority of that day because he's claustrophobic, and he was like, I'm not going to watch this. We It was amazing, the set that they built, but it was terrifying, and I did struggle a bit, but I had such amazing support from the crew and the cast, and it was just I think really, like you're saying, it's a turning point for that relationship when it feels like Naya and Kyle can start to become partners, instead of her being this like annoying buzzing fly, being like, I'm still here, we're doing this together. And I think that vulnerability that they both share in that moment of, oh my God, death was near.
And Wilson, with your character as well, you were mentioning before that, he has kind of his own set of morals, and there's little things like he's very happy to get paid to look the other way on certain things. Did you feel like the writing really gave you the morality of that character right out of the gate in order to figure out how to play him?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, one thing I think that's sort of amazing about the quality of the writing on a show like this is like it gives you just enough so that you have a really vivid image in your own mind for these characters without telling you exactly who these characters are, which is sort of like, in my mind, the best case scenario as an actor, because I read this guy on the page and it might not just, and nowhere on the page does it say this is a guy with a rigid sense of his own particularly weird morality. But to me, that there's something instinctive about it. And I see that with all these characters, that like, basically it gives an actor the freedom to make these characters their own in a way, while at the same time being really detailed portraits. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess that's just to say that like that particular element, I guess I don't know if that was on the page or not, but it seemed very clear to me, both in terms of action and I guess some of the dialogue as well. And in terms of the larger story, that's like it's an essential component of the dichotomy of these two characters and their relationship. That in the case of Eric's character, here's a guy who's sort of tormented with grief, with regret, with all his past and the decisions he's made. My character has not lost a wink of sleep over killing this guy. He's not lost a wink of sleep over a decision he's maybe ever made, and that's because he has this sense of I know exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, it's a really wonderful series. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking about it. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.